Alright, hey guys, I'm back with you with another video, and today we're going to going over this OEM Gateway machine. But before that, just a quick comment. Every once in a while I get a helpful hint from one of my commenters about the bed and the fact that it's, like fabric, and the risk of electrostatic discharge, which of course, it's the same principle if you rub your feet on a carpet and you touch something and you get a little shock. And it can build up in this kind of fabric-y material, and when you put electronic on it, it could zap it. So generally that's a big no-no. Thank you for the comments. I am completely aware of that. Unfortunately, I do not have the luxury of having lots of space and a nice wooden workbench table to do this on. So yes, I do take the risk when I use the bed as a table. But putting things on the bed for years and years, I can tell you that I've never had an incident. I am not saying you should do it. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm not even saying, I've heard some people say that you may not even see the effect immediately of it, but it's what I have to work with. So I try to put things under it, like this piece of wood, or like an anti-static bag when I'm putting a card on it, to really minimize the risk. I know it's a risk. I think it's worth taking in this situation. I've never had an incident. That's all I have to say about that. Although, would it be like, I guess I could get a cover that was like a space blanket. I don't even know if those are anti-static. That would be weird. Just like as your regular bedroom sheet is like a space blanket. Anyways, okay, so enough of that. Let's get on to today's machine, which is this Gateway. This is from the late 90s, maybe 2000 or very early 2000s. But I think it's the very late 90s. This is a Gateway GP7-500. So this is a 500 megahertz Pentium 3 system. Now, I usually don't get excited when I do these newer OEM systems. Early OEM systems from like the 80s and even the early 90s, those can be pretty damn interesting. But I just found out that like the late 90s OEM systems like Gateway and Dell and stuff, the Dell Dimensions are pretty cool. But I don't know, they're usually very samey. But I know a lot of people, it triggers a lot of nostalgia in people, because a lot of people had setups like this. A lot of people in the late 90s, they didn't really go and like build their own computer. They usually just bought these like OEM machines. And so when I do these videos, sometimes I get comments from people that, thanks for the memories and stuff. It brings back some nostalgia. So I do like doing them in that sense. So we're going to go over this machine. Now, I haven't touched this machine. I do not know the previous owner did any upgrades. I don't think the previous owner did any upgrades to it, but that's also interesting. I'll show you that in a second. So take it with a grain of salt if this is the stock configuration or not. So very clean unit. I don't think it was used very much. The case is a little interesting. It has this weird like kind of indent here. That's a little interesting. Now, there were many in this line. GP7, you could tell the CPU speed by the number here. 500, so 500 megahertz. There's like a 6, 7, 8, 9. There are probably other variations of it. Pentium 3 sticker, power button, no reset. I'm sure they intended you to do resets to the keyboard. This has a design for a Windows 98 sticker right here. A lot of bays. Interestingly enough, this isn't a bay. Like, this isn't a cutout here. They wanted you to put your floppy drive here. So you've got the drive up here, which is a DVD drive. Then right under it is a smaller bay for like a floppy or a zip drive. So that is kind of interesting, because usually these would just be all 5 1/4 inch or 5 1/4 inch bays. That would be 5 1/4 inch bays, but this one actually isn't. This is just a 3 1/2 inch bay. But we do have another 3 1/2 inch bay down here. So, yeah, that is kind of interesting. All right, so let's take a look at the back. All right, so here is the back of the machine. So we'll take a quick look here. Here's the power supply. Here is the label here, LP Mini Tower, blah, 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 GP7-500. But we do have a manufacturing date, 1/12/00. So this was manufactured in the year 2000. So that answers our question there. So this is a year 2000 machine. Something else very interesting, if you look right there, we have a property of Amiga Inc. Serial and then a serial number on there. Now, the guy I got this off of had a lot of other like Amiga stuff, and actually got a bunch of stuff off him, which will show up in these videos. But he's like me, he's into Amiga. I know him, the guy I got this off of, and he got this from a lot, and it was with a lot of Amiga stuff. So I don't know if this was being used. You know, how this was being used, but yeah, property of Amiga. Now, Commodore made the Amiga, but so this was afterwards. I'm not quite sure what the story was, but I don't think some Joe Schmo just bought this and slapped a sticker on it because he liked Amiga. From what my friend told me, with all the stuff he picked up, this was actually used in some sort of official capacity. There's other Amigas and stuff. There's probably an interesting story in that. If I find out more, I will tell you guys about it. I believe he did an image of the hard drive in here, but I think he might have wiped the hard drive. I don't know. Haven't booted this machine up, so we'll see. Okay, so over here, pretty standard. PS2 ports, USB. Probably I think it's 1.1. I don't think that's USB 2. 2 serial and a parallel port. No built-in video, no built-in audio. I like that though, because I like to add my own cards to it. So down here we see there is a lot of expansion slots. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Here's the video. It's DVI, which is interesting. Some sort of sound card, and then with Ethernet and modem, which would make sense if this was used in some kind of office capacity. Alright, so now we just need to look inside it. Alright, so here we're going to take a look at the motherboard on this GP7, this Gateway machine. So looking down in here, it might be a little hard to tell. We have an AGP slot. I believe this is a ×2 AGP. It could be ×2, ×4. The funny thing is it's a little bit hard, or at least I had a little bit of trouble finding solid information on this board. I couldn't even find a manual. I did find some specs for the Asus version of this board, because this board was kind of changed a little bit, I believe, for Gateway. So I did find some of the specs, but there wasn't the huge amount of information on this board like I usually find, or at least it wasn't easy to find all that information. And I don't know why that is exactly. I tried looking at Gateway's page for, like, you know, the stock setups and stuff, and I couldn't find this machine through like Wayback Archive and stuff, but it could be just my lack of skills Googling, but yeah, I couldn't find a whole lot of specific information on this, but I believe this is a ×4 AGP. Then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 PCI slots. One of them is shared with the ISA. Now that's really nice if you want to use this machine for like DOS stuff, that you have an ISA slot for old sound cards and whatnot. So coin battery, and we have one of those piezo speakers. Chipset for this machine is the 440BX chipset, so we have a limit of 100 megahertz front side bus. Here is the RAM. Now it uses 100 megahertz, so PC 100. It came stock with 128 megabytes, which is what's in it now, but you could upgrade this to 384, I believe was the max. So the specs so far on this thing aren't as good as, say, my Dell Dimension, but that's to be expected. My Dell Dimension 4100 is from a little bit later anyways, but that machine does lack the ISA slot. So overall, this might make a better machine if you want to run like fast, like DOS stuff. So here's the hard drive. I think this is, it's 13.6. I think this might be a 5400 RPM drive. I think this might be stock. It's a Fireball Plus KX. And oh yeah, here we go. Here's the star of it. We have a 500 megahertz Pentium 3. Now it doesn't have a fan on this cooler here, but it does, I think it gets its cooling from the fan on the power supply. It has the shroud and it blows the air down. Although I'm not sure, that might make it a little bit annoying to take out, which I'm actually going to attempt. eventually, because I think you might have to remove the whole power supply to change the CPU, because I don't see like screws or hinges or anything to just take this shroud off. So this might be one of those things where it requires taking out the power supply. Although this power supply looks a little thin. I don't think, this doesn't look like a stock. It doesn't quite look like proprietary, but it doesn't look quite like a generic one either. Floppy drive, of course we got our two IDE connections here. Now, I had a little bit of trouble finding out what the speed was here. The best I could find information on it was like ATA 33. That seems a little bit low for this machine. I would at least expect ATA 66. So I'm not 100% sure, but from what I looked up, I think it's just ATA 33 on this machine. Actually, before we fire it up, let's take a look at the cards that were installed in it that I took out so we could see the motherboard. First, the really boring stuff that I usually just throw away because I have no use for it. Looks like an Ethernet card, 3COM, obviously 3COM. Another thing with the, well, that, maybe this is the modem. That was, why am I getting so confused? I think this is the Ethernet. That's the modem. This is also from 3COM. Okay, enough said about them. Let's look at the sound card and the video card. Now, like I said, I haven't added anything to this machine, so I think these might be what came from the factory unless the previous owner installed them. Anyways, this is the sound card. This is a Creative, forget what this is called, model CT5803. I think this is very generic looking. I think these are like those, these were like those rebranded and Sonic cards that I never really cared for. Yeah, audio PCI cards. I've never really cared for these cards very much. They've always given me problems. I hear they're decent with, actually even being PCI, they're half decent with running in DOS, but I don't like these cards at all. They've always seemed very generic and low quality to me. And usually when I've installed them I have like sound issues. But I don't know. Your miles may vary. I don't like them. But they were cheap and plentiful. So here is that. Now he's digging. Hey, I'm trying to do something, buddy. I'm trying to shoot a video here. Okay? Go do that somewhere else. Go bark at yourself in the TV again. Or no, don't bark. Be quiet. But just sit there and be quiet. Anyways, okay. So here is the video card that was installed in it. That was DVI only, which is interesting. Big heat sink on it, and it is a TNT2 Pro, which is interesting because usually those all had like VGA. So I think this may be one of the earlier cards with a DVI interface. TNT2 Pro. I'm pretty sure there's earlier ones, maybe like a Matrox card that had the DVI connection, but this is probably one of the earlier ones. This might be good if you have like you're making sort of a retro DOS machine with sort of newer hardware, or you want to use a digital connection for whatever. But yeah, so that's kind of interesting for just a random find in an OEM build. So alright, let's go look at the machine itself in action. Alright, well, we're running, but it looks like there's no operating system on here. So I guess they were smart enough to erase the operating system. So I guess that's the first order, is just putting, well, Windows 98 on this thing and then at least getting it kind of going. And then we'll go from there. Ooh, hello, it's me from the future interjecting into this video. Well, the future compared to the video segment you were just watching. Actually, anyways, I was just editing this video and I realized I just started doing things without explaining that the video kind of took another course. So what is going to happen now, during, eventually this was just going to initially be kind of a generic short video just about this kind of generic gateway machine, but then I have all these kind of random parts laying around. I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if we took this fairly generic sort of small business oriented gateway and we turned it into something sort of unique and interesting, and maybe even a little exotic. Well, as you're going to see in the video, it doesn't quite work out the way I wanted to, and lots of tragedy and hijinks ensue. So yeah, this video might be a little bit long, but sit back and relax and enjoy the hijinks as I try to upgrade this into something kind of exotic. Oh, and since we'll be dealing with a Tulatin processor in this video, be sure to have your pronunciation corrections in the comment section. So I always get plenty of those whenever I deal with that processor. So grab something to drink, sit back, and enjoy the rest of this video. Okay, so for our video upgrade, I was just looking for an opportunity to try this card out, and what this is the very unique, this is the Rage Fury Max. Now, if you went on YouTube maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, you would find not much about this card. There were a couple like older videos, but they weren't very informative. It was just a guy that kind of had one and him putting it in his computer and firing it up. And then there was just another video of just this card running some games. No voice or narration or any info about the card at all. Now, of course, you could go surf the internet, Wikipedia, and all that. You could find some information on it. But as far as YouTube goes, there wasn't a lot of good information. Now, that changed recently in the past year or so. Phil from Phil's Computer Lab did a very good overview of this card. He, did benchmarks and all the tests and talked about it. And also rather sort of newer YouTuber. His channel is called Pixel Pipes, and he generally just goes over video cards, and he also did a review of this card. So yeah, he's relatively new. I think he's been doing videos for about 6 or 7 months now, and he already has more subscribers in 6 months than I have garnered in 2.5 years. But I'm not jealous. I'm a little bit jealous. So yeah, I'm going to be putting this card in my machine. Now, if you want more information specifically about this card, I would strongly suggest you check out their videos. But I will go over this card a little bit, since this revision does seem a little bit different than either of their cards featured in their video. And I'm not sure if this is a newer video or a newer revision or a really early revision where they like cut costs, but I would think it's a little bit later revision. So the things that are different of it, this socket, this BIOS right here is socketed rather than soldered onto the board. So I believe both of their cards, the BIOS is soldered on. And I also have these jumpers here and here, and these are to disable the individual GPUs on this card. Whereas I believe on their cards they have to do it through drivers and software. Here you just move the jumper and it will disable one of the other GPUs. I assume if you disable both of them, it just doesn't do anything. But if you do disable one, it just becomes a regular Rage 128 Pro. But with both of them active, it's this monster, which is the Rage Fury Max. Now, what this basically is 2 Rage 128 Pros on a single card. Now, other than a few sort of obscure earlier cards that weren't really consumer cards. I think like there was a weird sort of voodoo card that came out, but that was more for maybe developers or arcades or something. I believe this is the first commercial video card that uses 2 GPUs on a single sort of PCB. Could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure this is the first. And well, one of the weird things about this card is it actually only functions correctly in Windows 98. It doesn't function correctly in Me or XP. As far as I know, you need Windows 98 for it to function as a dual, for both of these to function correctly. So that's kind of an interesting thing. So right there, we won't be changing the OS. We will be using 98. The performance of this thing is okay. I don't think it was as great as what they expected. It was kind of an early implementation of this whole kind of setup. They were still trying to work things out. But yeah, I just really wanted an excuse to use this card. And another difference from their cards too is the stock speed on this is a little bit higher. Now there is some I wouldn't say it's debate, but the speed of these things kind of varies depending on the revision. But from doing some tests and looking at things like power strip and whatnot, I believe mine is a little bit faster stock than both of the cards, either Phil's card or the one from the guy at Pixel Pipes has. But they all can be pretty much overclocked to what the standard stock speed is. But yeah, the stock speed does vary depending on the revision of the card, apparently. So for a sound card, we're going to be doing something a little bit different and a little bit interesting here. We're going to be using this guy, which is a AMD Interwave 16-bit ISA sound card. Now, I found this guy sitting at a shelf randomly at Goodwill, and I picked it up. So what is the Interwave? Now, this came out, I believe, 1996. The Interwave was a licensed clone, I suppose you could say, of the Gravis Ultrasound. So they actually improved this over the Gravis design a little bit. They changed this where it can actually support up to 16 megabytes of added onboard RAM. They added some things with like enhanced compression, I believe like hardware synthesis of FM sound, just better sample rates. Overall, it's supposedly a better card. It's a very good sort of licensed clone. The thing is, I've never gotten this card to work, but then again, I only tried it in DOS, in an older DOS machine, so that could have been part of the problem. From what I understand, these cards were really sort of meant to work in a Windows environment, so since we're going to be putting Windows 98 on this machine, I'm going to see if I can get it to work. I know there's some things with drivers for this card that might be a little bit tricky, so I'm just hoping that the card does work, and my issue was just not knowing what I was doing with it in a DOS environment. So we're going to see if I can get it running in Windows. If I can't, that's a shame, because this is kind of a cool card. So we'll try that out, see what happens. Alright, and then the last major sort of upgrade component we're going to be using is this power leak converter. And basically what this lets us do is use socket 370 CPUs, socket 370 or PGA 370 Pentium 3s, and a slot 1 motherboard. So this is this is the Power Leap model IP3/T, and I believe the T designates that this is compatible with Tualatin CPUs. So I have no idea what CPU is actually installed. Now I did put this in a slot 1 board some time ago, and it posted, but I didn't get farther than that. So I don't actually know the exact CPU in there, and I actually haven't messed. I'm actually a little bit afraid to try to take this heatsink assembly off because I don't want to mess anything up, because these are quite uncommon these days and expensive. Now I just got this on a random slot 1 motherboard I picked up in a small lot. So it originally didn't come. There was originally supposed to be like a power adapter here, because you need to run power to this, and I didn't have it, so I just kind of hacked one of these Molex splitters. And if you want to know how to do that, you just take it out of the plastic case and you can connect these directly to power it. You'll have one extra, like right here, which I'm probably going to put like some electrical tape on there so we don't have a, just flinging around. But yeah, this setup works. That's basically how you do that if you get one that doesn't come with the little power adapter like mine did. Alright, so I did get our new Power Leap CPU in here, and it wasn't the easiest task. First of all, I did have to take the power supply out, and the shroud I had to remove because the CPU is just a little bit too high, so I had to remove the shroud, but that's okay. It's got its own fan on it. It wasn't the easiest thing to take out. I don't think Gateway really wanted you changing the CPU in these. I had to remove the little stands. One, it was a screw, and then the other side it was this kind of thing, and I had to take pliers and kind of pop these out because just the form factor of this, it wasn't slotting in there. So yeah, I had to remove both of these. So it's still, I mean, it's not like secured in there, but it's okay. It's good enough. I'm not going to be playing football with it or anything. It's just going to sit there and run, so it should be fine. I did power it up, and it does power up fine. I know what the CPU is now, and it's actually a 1.3 gigahertz Tualatin Celeron Tualatin. So actually, that's good. That's pretty cool. The Tualatin Celerons are actually pretty much just like regular Pentium 3, as in they have the same amount of L2 cache and everything. I think the only thing, the big difference is that the Tualatin Celerons run at 100 frontside bus, which is fine because that's what this board runs at, whereas the regular Pentium 3 copper mines will run at 133 frontside bus. So, but that's fine because this board is only capable of 100 megahertz front side bus anyways. Now, I could try to take this off and replace that. There is one faster chip, a 1.4 gigahertz Celeron, but 100 megahertz different. It's not really worth the trouble for 100 megahertz. Plus, from what I read, once you hit a gigahertz with the 100 megahertz front side bus, you know, you start to get diminishing returns after that. So I probably wouldn't see much of a difference at all between 1.3 and 1.4 gigahertz. So yeah, these Celerons, they're kind of like, there's a little bit of a step up from the Coppermine based Celerons. They doubled the cache on these, so to 256 L2 cache, so it's just like a regular Pentium 3 Coppermine. And I've read a couple different things, so I'm not sure, but I've read some things where they improved the interface, how the chip interacts with its L2 cache. It's a little faster, a little more efficient than the older Coppermine based Celerons, but it's not quite as efficient or fast as like a true Coppermine Pentium 3, so I don't know. But yeah, that's still a significant jump up from our 500 megahertz to 1.3 gigahertz. You know, I think the L2 cache is faster, even though our old slot 1 500 megahertz CPU, I think it had 512 kilobytes of L2 cache. That was running at half speed, so this is running at full speed. So yeah, this should be a significant CPU upgrade. So now I'm going to start upgrading the other components, and we'll test this thing out and see what kind of performance we can get. And so along with upgrading the CPU and the graphics card and putting in a sound card and stuff, we're going to do a couple other things too. We're gonna max that RAM out to the 384, I think is the max, 3 something. We're going to see if we can throw in a USB 2.0 card, and I'm going to throw in another hard drive, a bigger hard drive, and we'll throw in this ATA 100 just to bring our IDE bus up to speed. Yeah, I know it's like ATA and IDE and all that. I just kind of use them interchangeably because you kind of can, so I hope that doesn't create any confusion. Sometimes they call it, say, ATA, sometimes they say IDE or ED, whatever. Alright, so not so easy, and I'll show you why in a second here. Now, at first it would get to setting up this, because you use this for RAID arrays too, but I think you can just use it in a non-RAID setup. But every time it would get to this, and I'd start to play around with it, and then it would freeze up. So I disconnected the hard drive I actually had removed this card, and I just hooked everything up to the motherboard. And I figured maybe this was a problem, but it just kept freezing. It kept freezing on post, and then it started smoking. So yeah, my little makeshift power thing for the power leap, yeah, as you can see right there, it just didn't hold up. But I think I cut power and stuff before there's any real damage. I think the power leap itself is fine. But it is kind of, I mean, I ran this thing for like 2 hours prior, and it was fine. I had Windows 98 in there before, you know, with the original setup, and it booted Windows 98 fine, and I was looking at CPU-Z and checking out the CPU and stuff. So, I mean, this setup worked, but I guess it couldn't really hold up. So yeah, you could see it just got really hot and it like burnt through. So yeah, that's the danger when you do have like homemade wiring and crap. But just getting that, whatever the official connector for this damn thing, is like impossible. So I'm either gonna have to find one, or I'm gonna have to make another one of these makeshift things and maybe hope it holds up a little bit better. So until that's done, I guess this project's on hold. So I guess I'll see, we'll get back to this whenever I can figure out a solution to this damn power leap power supply thing. Alright, so it is a few days later with this build here. I put the, you know, after that cord fiasco, I put the 500 megahertz, the original CPU back in it. So this card here, actually, I discovered rather than just a straight up IDE controller that's faster, it's actually more of a RAID card. You can still use it as a faster IDE controller if you just set it to, I think, like Stripe 1, where it just uses one hard drive. As for this guy here, the Interwave, no luck. I have not been able to get sound out of this thing at all, and it's really annoying. And I think there's like it's creating like resource conflicts, and I can't find why. I did upgrade the RAM to 384 megabytes. I don't remember if I talked about. There's some interesting things about this RAM with upgrading the RAM on this machine, and that seems to be that I had to use 3 128 megabyte sticks. If you used like a 256 or a 512 megabyte stick, in the BIOS it would show up, it would see it. It would say, you know, DIMM 2 or slot 2 or whatever has a 256 megabyte stick in it, but it wouldn't use it at all. So when you boot up Windows, you'd still just have like 128. It wouldn't even use like part of it, you know what I mean? Like usually, like if I put a 512 megabyte stick in here, a lot of machines, if the cap was like 384, it would give me my 384 megabytes of RAM, and the rest would just be wasted. But this machine just won't use the stick at all if it's over 128 megabytes. Now I read online, some people have been able to get this board to accept 256 megabyte RAM sticks, but I think you have to be like really specific on the type. But it's okay. I'm just using 3 128 megabytes. So find generic drivers for the Interwave, but I'm just having no luck with this thing. It's synth, and then I have Sound Blaster Ad Lib. I tried to set it with IRQ 5 and DMA 1. I think that's pretty standard. There's the RAM. Usually it's 512. You'll have bank 0, 256, bank 1, 256. But with that RAM stick on there, I've got basically 1.256 megabytes of RAM. Still, one thing I can't figure out, it's coming up unknown. And even though I checked the disks with the driver, the file with the drivers, nothing, it's saying no drivers found. So I don't even know what that is. But here we have, I did find drivers on that disk for like the game port, then just Interwave FM Sound Blaster emulation, Interwave MPU 401 emulation, Interwave synth codec, but no matter what I do, I cannot get this thing to make any sound. And I mean, I'll ask around on some forums and stuff, but I might just give up on it and put something else in there just for the sake of finishing this video. So other than that, yesterday I got another one of these cables. This one's just a straight Molex like extension cable, because I'm gonna make this into something so I can hook up that power leap. Now you might be thinking, like, why take the chance, you know, but you know, the truth is I'm never going to find, I mean, odds of finding like the official power connector for that power leap are probably slim to none. I'll probably have just as much success as I have trying to find my manual for Loom for Turbo CD, which I've been looking for years, and it's never going to pop up. Same with that power cable. And I guess I could buy another power leap, like a complete one, but I don't want to spend that kind of money on it, and if I can even find one when they do pop up on eBay. So yeah, I'm just gonna take a risk, and I'm just gonna make another one of those kind of like homemade power cables. This isn't a splitter, so it doesn't have like the cable going in and out, so maybe it's a little more sturdy. I don't know, we'll find out. Alright, so it's about 3 in the morning, and we've had a breakthrough with this card. And I decided I was having no luck getting those drivers to work, and there was still that one thing in it was an unknown device, and it was connected to this card, and there's just no drivers for it. So I did some more research, and I found out this card's very specifically, it's something called it's an Interwave, but it's it's like a compact SoundRage 32 Pro. So there was actually special drivers for it, which I found. But installing those drivers, the card was even worse off than before. There was more things missing. So I had the idea maybe if I mixed the official drivers for this card with those generic Interwave drivers, and you know, I kind of pointed everything. I installed the compact sound Rage 32 Pro drivers, and for the stuff that didn't set up, or for some reason some of the files were missing from that driver pack, I was able to kind of fill in with the generic driver pack for the Interwave chip. And well, I'm getting sound from it, but the sound's real like distorted. But I mean, at least that's better than what I was doing before. So I'll show you an example of what the sound's like. Alright, I don't want it too loud because it's like 3 in the morning and there's neighbors because it's an apartment. So I'll put it real close. We'll hear the startup jingle. So yeah, real distorted and staticky. So I'm not quite sure what I can do about that. I'll try a couple different things. The card might just be messed up. I mean, I randomly found it on a shelf at Goodwill, so I don't know, but at least I'm getting some sound out of it, and that's something. So I guess the next step too is putting in that Rage Fury Max, and then putting in the Power Leap CPU locket. Alright, so for the sake of this project moving forward, I think I'm done with the AMD, well, Interwave sound card, or the compact Sound Rage 32 Pro, or whatever it's called. It's just like roadblock after roadblock, and I have quickly lost my enthusiasm for getting this card to work. Now, I'm sure there's some sound card wizards watching this that are like, haha, it's easy, you just need to do this and that, but I've been at it for like a day and a half now, and I just give up. I've tried so many different drivers. There's even a guy on Vogans that has a forum post on this very card, and he has like a page, 2 pages of instructions on getting the thing to work, and it's like mix matching 5 different drivers and flashing a ROM, or it's just at this point it's just not worth the time and effort. The best I was able to do is I could get it to play. It wouldn't play MIDIs, it wouldn't play anything except very simple Windows sounds, and you heard that in the last clip. Even those were very distorted. And I'm just tired of hitting roadblocks like this when I try to play around with different drivers for it, and then I have to keep going into safe mode, and it's a pain in the ass, and it's not worth it. It's not worth my time, and I want to get this project moving forward. So unfortunately, there will be no compact Sound Rage 32 Mega Super Edition, whatever it's called. But apparently that card is a little weird. I was reading it has like a fader in it that none of the other Gravis sort of plug-and-play type cards have, and that's what causes issues with certain drivers. I don't know. I don't know why there's not just a driver packet that you just install and then it installs. I don't know why there has to be 2 pages of instructions on getting the thing to work, and I still haven't been able to. So yeah, I'm done with it. I'm just going to put in something unfortunately less interesting, but something that will be easier to work with, because like I said, my enthusiasm for this project is quickly waning. So I don't know, maybe I'll revisit this card in the future. Well, sometimes you gotta know when to throw in the towel so a project can move forward. And I'm just not making much progress with that Sound Rage 32 Pro. So I looked through my stash. I couldn't find a lot of unique ISA sound cards really that weren't either being used in other builds or just sitting around. So best thing I could come up here with is this AW64. I know this isn't the most unique card or rare card, but it is different from an old Sound Blaster 16. It's ISA, and it should fit our needs just fine. This model is it's a CT4380. Well, right here it says SB32 value, so it seems like it might be like an AW32 value or a Sound Blaster 32. But looking online, I'm pretty sure this is just a sort of a budgety AW64. So in DOS, this should function more or less like an AW32, although with this build, DOS isn't really a priority. This is more of a Windows machine. We got a connector for IDE, which is nice, but we're not going to use it. There's nothing for a wavetable, but at least this card, I think, gives us some MIDI capabilities. These here are for a memory expansion, which I do not have, at least not for this card. Now this card comes with 512 kilobytes of memory on board. Some of the later, like the gold, the AUG gold stuff, I think has 1 or 2 megabytes. Not exactly sure off the top of my head, but yeah, this should serve us well. There's no true like OPL3 FM chip on it, but like I said, this is going to be more like a Windows machine, so DOS isn't a priority, although this should do okay in DOS. So alright, well, now at least we can hopefully continue with the build, so unless this gives me problems, but this is a pretty standard card. There's all kind of drivers and support and info on this thing everywhere, so this should install without any problems whatsoever. Alright, so that pretty much installed without a hitch. It's coming up under Device Manager as AW64, 16-bit compatible, AW64 wavetable MIDI, AW32 compatible, and there's the joystick. Now there's that RAID controller right there. It seems to be working fine, although I do not have drivers for it, but it is working okay. You'd think it would be a simple thing to find drivers for this thing, but I can't seem to find them for this specific card, unfortunately. A little quick note on that too. Even though this is an ATA 100 controller and it should be a big boost from the ATA 33 on the motherboard, and even though I'm using an Ultra IDE hard drive, you won't always see that performance boost in real world. Like, I have not seen the real performance boost after installing this card. Theoretically, even though it's like 100 megabytes per second transfer rate, that's just theoretical. You're not automatically always going to hit that, if ever. So just keep that in mind. It's not really a magic bullet when you update that. A lot of it kind of sometimes depends on the hard drive and the hardware and what you're doing and stuff. But yeah, it works just fine now. Alright, so the Rage Fury Max is installed, and of course, because nothing can be easy, I was getting errors. Apparently there was a resource conflict with PCI port 2, which this happened to be plugged into. So apparently, for whatever reason, the Rage graphics card was having a conflict with this USB controller. Now, I haven't tried to fix the problem or solve it. I just yanked this card and installed the graphics card, but I'll probably mess with that in a minute. But if this is something I have to sacrifice, then so be it. Although I find that odd. I very rarely have graphics cards conflicting with other cards. But maybe it has something to do with the fact that there's it's sort of like 2 graphics cards on one, so it's taking up more resources than a normal graphics card, maybe. I'm also very suspicious of this fan right here, because sometimes it doesn't seem to kick in. I'm trying to take a good look. Yeah, it's okay, it's running now, but sometimes this fan doesn't seem to kick in, which is suspicious to me. I had to play around with those jumpers a little bit, but right there you can see, sorry if the screen is blah, 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 a lot of getting new lines and stuff, but we have under display adapters Rage Fury Max, and under with power strip, the engine clock 125 megahertz with 142 megahertz memory clock. So I'm going to just investigate this a little bit more to make sure the Fury Max is working okay, and then we're going to try, we'll run some benchmarks, and then I'll throw in, we'll check out the power leap. Such a mess of wires. It never ends. Anyways, with the Rage Fury Max that I was so happy to pick up at a very cheap price, on the surface it seems to run okay. It displays, the VGA fine through the desktop, but when you run any kind of game or benchmark program or anything that uses its 3D acceleration abilities, you get that. So there's a couple things. I know this card is extremely finicky, so I'm actually hoping it's maybe a weird motherboard incompatibility rather than the card itself, like having a memory problem or something, or corrupt memory, or bad drivers maybe, although I've tried 2 drivers. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to take out this card, I'm going to put it in my Dell Dimension 4100, and I'll see if I have the same problem. If I have the same problem in that machine, it is very likely something is wrong with the video card, which sucks. In that case, I do have a backup for sort of a weird quasi-exotic video card to put in this thing, and that would be the old Cairo 2 Power VR card. This is another card that, you know, it's been pretty well done on Phil's Computer Lab. He's pretty much talked about that, but you know, the video's not about the card itself. I just want to put something different in this machine. Also notice the fan is gone. It didn't work. That's okay. These don't get too hot, and I can put a PCI fan next to it. I know this card works. I've used it many times. So that's my backup in case the Rage Fury Max doesn't work, but that sucks because I was really excited to get this card because it is not a common card and it's kind of expensive on eBay. So let me throw it in the Dell Dimension, see if it works. So yeah, big bummer. Here's the Rage Fury Max running in the Dell Dimension 4100 here, and same issue. So it looks like an issue with the card. But it looks, I know this is a finicky card apparently, but it looks like the Dell 4100 motherboard and the one in that old Gateway GP7-500 are compatible, for the most part it seems, but I guess it looks like there's something wrong with my card. So, this was like a big part of that whole build. I was really excited about owning this card too, but I don't know if anyone has any suggestions or things they think might be wrong with it that I could do to fix it, but if it's a memory issue, like a corrupt memory module on the card, it's screwed basically. The bummer. That sucks. I looked for one of these for like years, and I finally found one, but that's what you get sometimes with $10 deals off Craigslist. This is kind of a different video card. So we got the 3D Profit 4500. This is what did I say? God, I can't even think now. Power VR based. It doesn't have like a special API like the older ones that are Power VR based, but it does do things. It runs like it's very efficient rather than raw power. I forget exactly what it's called, but it builds everything with triangles maybe or something, or it only renders what it needs to on the screen. Like I don't know the specifics. There's plenty of good videos on this card and how it works out there. So just, you know, use the search function in YouTube and you'll find some good information on this. Phil did a couple videos on this card, so it's a little different. It's a little exotic, not as cool, but it's something. At least we're not throwing in like a Verge or something. So the fan is obviously dead on this. I know this card works because I've used it many times. Actually in that Dell machine. I picked this up actually when I was visiting San Diego at a flea market. Same flea market where if you watch Pat the NES Punk, he does those flea market madness sales. This was a couple years ago. And I just went there to check it out because I was in the city, and I found this. And originally the guy wanted like 35 bucks for it, but I think I ended up getting it for like $5 or $7. So it doesn't have the fan, but what I'm going to do is I put these little hook this up to the you know, where you usually plug the fan in. It's got those two prongs at the end, and this is just a PCI slot fan, and I'm going to install this next to it, and I should be able to plug those into here, 2 of these. I'll have to experiment, and that should power it, and that's kind of like a fan. These don't get really hot. I mean, it might be okay with just the heat sink, but I'm not gonna. I don't have a fan to fit this, so it should be just fine with the fan and then the PCI fan next to it, maybe blowing down on it, dissipating the heat. So, since I have used this card before, I am not anticipating any problems, but who knows. But hey, one positive is we got to put our USB controller back in, so that's something. Alright, so everything's plugged in. I've got those two plugged into the power header there. I had to move the USB card down, but that's okay. So here's our Cairo 2 Profit 4500. Here's our fan next to it, blowing on the heatsink and then dissipating. And everything's set up now. There's our AW64. There's our hard drive controller. So let's see. Oh, there the fan kicked in. That's good. That's a good. Yeah, that's a good breeze, and it's not very loud, so that should do just fine. And there we go. Video kicked in. I know this card works in like 3D Accelerator. I've used it before, like I said, so shouldn't be any surprises. Alright, so here we have the new Power Leap in there with the 1.3 2 Latin Celeron. On further thought, I'm thinking the power of this Cairo 2 might actually be a better fit for this machine. It's a little more powerful, it's a little more versatile than the Rage. We also don't have to worry about micro stutters, or it's just a more versatile card overall. Although yeah, it's still a bummer that Rage Fury Max didn't work. I really wanted to check that card out, but in retrospect, this probably is a better match for this build. So let's see if this is going to work now. I kind of rigged up the new power connector there, and let's see if it works. Alright, light came on. I believe the fan is spinning. There we go. We've got, sorry for the glare. So it is, at least it's posting, it seems, so we'll see. Alright, so here's our post screen. You see it's coming up as a Pentium Pro 1 megahertz, but when we get into Windows, it does detect it weird. Now, you'll also notice the screen is off. Now, this seems to happen with the with that Power VR card in this machine, and then when we get into Windows, you just go into the driver utility for the Power VR card, and you just shift the screen over, or I guess you could use the controls on the monitor, but that's just a weird little thing, because the battery was dead when I was using the TNT card as well, but it didn't do this weird thing where the screen was shifted to the left. So it's just a little quirk, but that. Alright, so here's our CPU Z settings, Intel Celeron 2 Latin. There we go, 1.3 gigahertz. So this is only the 256 kilobytes of L2 cache, not the 512, because it is Celeron, but that's the same amount of L2 cache in a regular Coppermine Pentium 3. So I guess now I'll run the same benchmarks, and then we'll just check out some games in action. Alright, so here is our upgrade between our stock configuration and the 1.3 gigahertz Celeron, the Power Leap, and the Profit 4500, the Cairo 2 card. It's quite striking. Now, I haven't gone so heavy on benchmarks in this video as past ones. I'm going to have some more gameplay footage, but I do have this little bit of benchmarks here. Now, I didn't mark down the synthetic benchmarks, but for those curious, yeah, the upgrade made a big difference. With 3D Mark 2000, it was 2,294 to 3,354, and with 2001 SE, it was 941 for the stock setup to 1,846 with the upgraded setup. So, yeah, I mean, looking through these, even with the 500 megahertz and the TNT Pro, all these games are more than playable, the games that we benchmarked real quick here. But Quake 2, after the upgrade, looks like performance, more than doubled. Same with Quake 3. MDK 2, same thing. Expendable, performance didn't quite double, but it went up significantly, almost doubled. And then I just threw in some 3D reality marks just for the hell of it. So, yeah, just a real quick look at the benchmarks this time. So now we're just going to go into some gameplay footage. Alright, so all these tests I did at 800 by 600 by 32, and here's MDK2. These are all run after the upgrade, processor and video card upgrade to the Cairo 2, so keep that in mind. So yeah, here's MDK2 game released, I think in 1999, and it runs very well on this setup. Alright, so now we have Quake 3 running. Of course, this game's running really great in this setup. I think this was another 99 game that came out in 99 or maybe 2000, but I think it was 99. This game pulled over 30 frames per second even on the 500 megahertz machine, the stock configuration. But again, we were running at 800 by 600. Yeah, someone in the last video commented that I kind of sucked at Quake 3, and yeah, that's completely true. This here was maybe my 4th time ever playing the game. I mean, I like these games. I like first-person shooters. I'm not the best at them, and I've never really played like arena-style first-person shooters, like multiplayer ones, much. Even like the Call of Duties and stuff, I just never played them that much. So yeah, that's accurate. I do kind of suck at these games. But yeah, this one holds a consistent 91 FPS. Alright, so here's Age of Mythology, just to mix things up, and I was just kind of playing this, goofing around, and you can see I'm getting pulverized here, my small encampment. But yeah, this game ran smooth too. There's no frame counter up there, but you can see the game's quite playable. Although I didn't get to a point where, you know, they were big built-up cities and huge armies, but I'm pretty sure it would play just fine. Alright, so here is Expendable, and you cannot see the frame counter because it's cut off up there, but getting pretty consistently playable frame rates on this game. This game played just fine except for the sort of awkward controls this game has. You can see I haven't played it in a while, so I'm not doing the best, but yeah, it was completely playable. Definitely pulling over 30 FPS. I think it was 60 plus most of the time up there. So yeah, another completely playable game that I believe is from the year 99, I believe. So yeah, you'd be playing this around the time that this system came out. Alright, so we've seen a lot of games from like 2000, 99 and earlier, and the system handles them just fine. So let's try stressing things a little bit now. So here is Serious Sam. This came out a little bit after 2000. I don't know the exact date. It's like 2002, 2003, somewhere around that, give or take. And starting off, it plays just fine. Remember, this is 800 by 600 by 32. And normally in these smaller areas, it does just fine. Although, you'll see in a second here, when we get into more open areas in the game, it does start to choke a little bit. So keep watching, keep an eye on that frame counter, and I'll show an area where it opens up here in a second.
so here's me installing Far Cry, the demo, and as you can see here, this machine with the hard drive and everything, it just does installing painfully slow. Now I never could get Far Cry to run. Once it installed, you click on the shortcut and just nothing would happen. So that is the fault of the video card for whatever reasons. Probably not a compatible DirectX version. Okay, so here's Grand Theft Auto 3, and it's running horrendously. Even dropping resolution virtually does nothing. This game is giving me flashbacks to my Pentium 4 build fiasco, but let me assure you, we are using the latest drivers for the Cairo 2 video card, and the chipset drivers are installed. That said, I still am surprised that this setup is running this game so poorly, and I'm very suspicious of this gameplay footage, so kind of take it with a grain of salt. During the install, when I had the message, where it's changing textures for your video card for optimal performance, the game kind of glitched out at that point, and then it started running, but reinstalling and resetting everything, I still got the same result. So I'm not sure what's going on here, but take this gameplay with a grain of salt. There might be something going on here, though I'm pretty sure the fault here is with the video card, because we'll see later. I changed the card and it plays fine. And lastly, can it play Halo? And the answer to that is a resounding no. I believe that also is a DirectX issue. The card just does not support this game. I think this game came out in like 2003 or 4, give or take. But here we get a little message here that it does not support this card. Now, doing some Googling, I found out that there may be like a patch to get around this issue, but I don't usually deal with stuff like that, so I just let it go. But yeah, no Halo on the Cairo 2 with this set. So after seeing the rather poor results on the upgraded compact machine with some later games, I decided, what if we bring it up in line more like the machines in my last video, that 1 GHz Coppermine Pentium 3 and the RDRAM Pentium 4 build with the 1.5 GHz Willamette CPU. So I took the GeForce 2 Ultra out of that machine and I put it in this machine, and we got really good results, very close to the results I was getting with that Pentium 4. So it was a little surprising. I didn't think it would do quite as well just because we had a little bit slower front side bus on this machine, 100 megahertz front side bus, and only a little bit slower RAM, the PC100, as opposed to the PC133 or the RDRAM. But it actually did very well, and even with a lesser amount of RAM too. That doesn't really affect speed, but none of these games needed that much RAM. But yeah, I'm surprised it did very well. It performed very well against those machines, very close to kind of the performance I was kind of getting with the Pentium 4. There's that video glitch like in the last video because I'm using the same drivers and card here. So enjoy some of these tests with the upgraded compact machine, and keep in mind to keep it in line with my last video. I'm now running all these at 1024 by 768 by 32. Alright, so now we're going to check out some serious Sam First Encounter again on this upgraded compact. We're at 1024 by 768 by 32, and we're getting really good results with the upgrade to the GeForce 2 Ultra, so pretty smooth. If you remember before with the Cairo 2, the game kind of choked a bit in more open areas with a lot going on, but we've pretty much gotten rid of that problem now with the video card upgrade.
Yeah, baby!
Alright, so here we are running GTA 3, and it's running just fine now with the GeForce 2 Ultra. We're getting pretty consistent frame rates at 30, 31. Now, everything I read and research said this game had some kind of like a frame limiter, and there's even an option to turn it on and off, although it doesn't seem to do much in the options. But every once in a while I'll get a spike over the 30 frames per second. So I don't know what's going on. I don't know if this game has a limiter or not. But yeah, it runs just fine now. See, now we're getting 40 some frames per second. But either way, it runs pretty smooth now that we've put in the GeForce 2 Ultra. Again, I still think it's weird that it ran so poorly with the Cairo 2, because I mean, that's still a decent card, so I still suspect something was going on, but I had none of those issues when using the GeForce 2 Ultra. Lastly, will it play Halo now? And that is a resounding yes. Now, I did have to put the resolution to 800 by 600 just to get pretty decent frame rates, but everything else is high. Particle effects are set to high, textures are set to high, and decals are on. Now, if I'm playing extra terrible here, it's because I accidentally had the controls inverted and I couldn't figure out how to set them back the other way. Because I was just kind of quickly doing the benchmark here, the gameplay footage. But yeah, that's why I'm doing extra terrible, because the controls are sort of messed up for me. But yeah, it's completely playable here. I mean, we do get dips under 30 when this stuff's going on, but in general, it's pretty playable.
Way to go! Lost contact! Does anyone see him?
Look, enemy force!
Get on it! Got you covered!
9, fall back to second.
Move in! Back in the airlock! I'm gonna too far for him! Does anyone see him? That's the way to do it!
Alright, so I know this video has gone on quite long, over an hour now. I tried editing it down, but it's just a long video. And I thought about breaking up in 2 parts, but we're just going to go with it, and I'm just going to wrap things up here for you guys. So, first of all, the stock configuration of this machine is just fine. Sometimes I forget that, a Pentium 500 that originally came in this machine, it's pretty decent. It can run games from the time just fine when paired with a decent card. But, when you play around with all this really high-end stuff from the same time period, like Pentium 4s running it over a gig and 1 gig, Pentium 3s, 500 megahertz seems really outdated and antiquated, but this machine is from the year 2000. I think it was a little bit behind. It was a little budgety, a little oriented toward an office rather than a gamer, but it's still very capable parts. That TNT2 Pro works just fine, and the 500 megahertz Pentium 3 really isn't a slouch. It seems, 500 megahertz for the same year, there's a gigahertz, or the year after, there's a gigahertz model out, the Pentium 4, it's running over a gigahertz the same year, but really, it's not really a slouch. So this machine in its stock configuration, I think, is a really good kind of Windows 9X machine. Uh-oh, he saw himself in the TV. Windows 95, 98 machine, really good. The 16-bit ISA slot is really nice for DOS compatibility. So yeah, I think this is a decent machine at stock configuration. If you see one sitting around for real cheap and you need a retro machine, I would recommend picking one of these up. Plus, slot 1 builds are just kind of cool. They have kind of a cool feel to them. Now, unfortunately, I wasn't able to make it as exotic as I wanted to. The Rage Fury Max, unfortunately, I really wanted that card to work. Although in the end, it would have dragged this machine down performance-wise, but it would have been really kind of cool. Hopefully, I'll find a working one day. Or maybe someone will make a suggestion in this video that I'm missing something really stupid and the card works. Maybe there's some trick. I doubt it, though. As far as the compact Ultrasound 32, that's another bummer. Although, you know, I found that at a shelf at Goodwill. Who knows what it was through. Hopefully it's not some kind of, well, I don't know what that would be. But, you know, I made that whole spiel at the beginning about how, oh, electromagnetic shock from putting things on my bed has never affected me, and then those two cards don't work. But I always take precautions. They were always in anti-static bags and stuff. I mean, I've got nowhere else to work here. So, but I don't think that's the case. I think when I got them, they were probably, something was wrong. The compact card, it may just be user error. I may just have a really... maybe I just don't know how to set it up. I tried everything though, different drivers, put it in different slots, different machines, all kind of different IRQs and DMAs. I just could not get that card to function properly. So I don't know what the story is with that. Okay, so now on to the upgrade components really quick. The Power Leap converter. Now that came out, I'm not sure the year, but it was originally $169. It came with the Celeron, but I think originally it came with the 1.2 gigahertz Celeron to Latin, and it came with the heatsink, and it came with the CPU and the adapter. So I mean, that's a pretty decent deal. I know, you know, the faster chips were pretty expensive. It does its job really well. It really gave me the performance boost, so I think it works well. I think later on they upped the price to like a $179 or $189, and they put the 1.3 gigahertz Celeron on it, and I think they even later came out with the 1.4 gigahertz Celeron that you could buy directly. It does what it says it does. It works pretty well. Now remember, you're limited. This machine is still limited by the lower front side bus. You might be able to overclock it. I didn't. But 100 front side bus, even compared to, you know, like a, I forget the socket type, but just a regular sort of Pentium 3, like a copper mine. I thought it would affect things more. I thought the RAM limit, too, maybe some games wouldn't work because it didn't have enough RAM. I thought maybe the lower front side bus would affect things more, but it really didn't seem to. I mean, it is only 33 megahertz. So, yeah, I mean, that's not a huge consideration, but this machine aside, just thinking about the Power Leap, that could be a really effective, especially in like a higher end slot 1 board. So the Power Leap itself, yeah, it is a really nice sort of magic bullet that if you have one of these older machines and you don't want to swap hard drives or data, or you want to keep some of those legacy connections like your 16-bit ISA slots or whatnot, I think that was a really decent sort of upgrade option. It seems to work well. Now I do want to briefly talk about the Cairo 2, because if you look at the results of the video, you think I might be like dumping on that card. Oh, it's a terrible card. No, it seems to play games from when it came out and earlier just fine. It has really good image quality. It's kind of interesting and neat. But it just seems that the further you get away from its release date, it didn't really have great support. And although that's true for all graphics cards, the further you get away from their release date, you get diminishing returns and they don't give as good a performance in games. But it just seems to be particularly tough on the Cairo 2. It just, once you start getting farther away from that release date, it just seems to, you know, start really struggling with later games. Although, like I said, there might be like patches and workarounds for some of those games, but I mean, for the year it came out, for the very early 2000s, and for a Windows build, like an earlier, and even DOS, I think it's a decent card. Now remember, it was a budget card, So you can't expect the world from it. But no, I don't think it's a terrible card. For what it is, I think it's interesting and I think it's neat. I think it's a little bit unique because I know it renders things differently. Its whole thing was efficiency. So that's about all I have to say on that. Finally, with the full upgrade, so you put in a nice ISA, maybe sound card if you want some DOS capability. You put in the power leap. You put in like a, maybe a high-end. You splurged on a high-end graphics card like when I put in the GeForce 2 Ultra or even something more powerful. I think this makes this a very capable machine. It takes it from kind of a boring-ish, small office use machine. You really can turn this into sort of a gaming machine for early XP stuff and Windows stuff, and you get the cool factor of having slot 1. And if you like Gateway, I know I have a friend that loves Gateway, so he just wants like Gateway OEM builds. But this would be a cool idea if you want sort of a retro-looking Gateway that can play later stuff. Put in a power leap if you can find one. Put in a decent graphics card, and you'll have a decent sort of retro machine. Now, the BIOS on this machine, there aren't any options for like disabling cache and stuff, so it's really not as easy to slow this machine down to play if you want to play like older DOS stuff. I think you could use probably software like MoSlow and stuff maybe. So it's not the easiest to slow down and play really, really old DOS stuff. But I think for Windows and late DOS stuff, it runs just fine. So yeah, sorry for rambling on. I know this video is super long. It's my longest video. But I know some people kind of like it. Seems to be a trend, shorter videos. I notice a lot of YouTubers, I don't know, it's not as satisfying in a 15-minute, 10-minute video. Sometimes it's nice to sit down and have an hour video if you're on break or late at night and need to kill time. So that's what this is. So I hope it was entertaining and interesting. If you have comments, please let me know in the comments section. If you have any ideas for this machine or ideas for my cards that didn't work, please let me know. So thanks again. If you like this kind of stuff, please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.